Structured onboarding is another important way that we can manage retention. Remember I said that our onboarding actually starts when we start recruiting people, because we start sending messages to the potential applicants to let them know who we are, what we're about, what we value. We make sure our website and our hiring materials all reflect aspects of the company and what it is that it wants to communicate to people and what it wants people to take away and why we're a good employer to work for. So it really starts with recruiting. But then as people get hired and then we start to bring them on board, this is where we are trying to enhance that person-organization fit. In the hiring process, we're assessing to some extent whether or not they'll fit into the organization and its organization's culture. But most importantly, we're assessing their knowledge, skills, and abilities, the person-job fit. As we determine that they're probably a good fit for our company, we then turn around and we will do an onboarding program. It isn't just an orientation program, because an orientation is like, here's your paperwork, sign this, here's that, here's this manual. Onboarding is how do we get people embedded in the culture, getting to know what the company's like, learning about who is important and who is got influence, learning where resources are, learning the way that we like to do work. So matching that person to a mentor, matching them to coworkers, helping them to feel like they are welcomed, that they matter, that they belong, and that the organization cares about them. So it's a big part of that process. So connecting them to coworkers is going to be really key, and connecting them to mentors, peer mentors, and obviously mentors who are their superior, not in their direct line of reporting, but somebody else in the organization. So companies that have good peer mentoring and strong formal mentoring programs, those are key to onboarding, and they're an important part of that onboarding process. If we think back to the lecture on strategic HR and what some of those best practices are, this is a way to consider what we can do to improve employee retention. So we want to engage in what we call high commitment HR practices, where we develop workers so they have the knowledge to do their job, so they get trained appropriately. This helps them to improve their abilities, and at the same time, they will be more likely to stay at the company, and it makes them more employable both within and outside of the company. Now, employability, people might argue, well, why would we train them and then let them go somewhere else? That's the nature of the beast. You take the chance to invest in them with the hopes that by investing in them, by treating them fairly, by paying them well, by doing all the right things by them, it increases the likelihood that they're going to stay. You will never get 100% compliance with staying. It's just never going to happen. But we want to increase the probability that people are likely to stay. And consider it this way as well. If we have another organization that trains their workers, that worker leaves, they come to our company, we now have a trained worker that we wouldn't have thought about before. So not to worry about whether or not somebody gets the training that they need, whether or not they're going to leave you, because ultimately people are going to behave in the way that they need to behave. And they will stay if we do the best things that we can do. That doesn't mean that they will be 100% likelihood they're going to stay, but our goal is to just increase that likelihood no matter what. We want people to be employable in our company. We want them to grow and develop in our company, and creating those opportunities for them and then training them for it is important. It's important that we focus on what are the things that predict turnover. Low job satisfaction and workers that are not content are more likely to leave. Workers that don't feel engaged, that don't have a connection to the company, that don't feel connected or care are more likely to leave. When there is no trust between the organization and its managers and the employees, they are more likely to leave. So this is the key to everything: is focus on what is creating dissatisfaction. Focus on why people are disengaged and don't feel connected to the company. Focus on making sure people are doing things in a way that builds trust. And that will be the way that we can, one of the tools that we can use to manage turnover/retention. As we've said before, turnover is going to happen. And in fact, we're never going to be in a situation where there's no turnover. So our goal is to minimize the dysfunctional turnover, to minimize voluntary turnover, but nonetheless, turnover is going to happen. So when we have positions where there's likely going to be high levels of turnover, for example, entry-level workers at McDonald's, the turnover rate at McDonald's is high. The turnover rate at Circle K is high. The turnover rate at, those call centers that do telemarketing calls is incredibly high. So the goal here is to minimize the costs that it will take to rehire people to fill those vacancies. So if we know that there's nothing we can do, that these are positions that will naturally have higher levels of turnover, then our job is to do what we can to curb the turnover, to make sure that we've got standardized jobs and standardized tasks that minimizes the damage and minimizes the cost to replace. When employees leave, it's not always a bad situation. Sometimes people leave for better opportunities, or they leave and everybody agrees it's a good idea to leave because there's no internal opportunities for them. It doesn't mean that they're leaving with a bad taste in their mouth or that they have a bad connection to the organization. And in fact, what they are more likely to do is to speak well of your company and to recommend people to go work there. They can recommend customers to come and do business with you. So when we treat our workers fairly, even if they leave, we understand the reasons why they leave, and they leave under good terms, that can still be a benefit to us. And other things that can happen too, sometimes people leave and then they do what they call boomerang and they come back. Like they leave, they go do something else, then they come back and they come work for you again. This is not a bad thing either, as long as they leave on good terms, they haven't engaged in bad behaviors or illegal behaviors or unethical behaviors. There's no reason why you couldn't hire somebody back that you already know was a good worker, because they already know your culture. They are going to be easier to onboard. They're going to cost you less money because they already know how things work. So this is not a bad idea. We can always look to former employees as a source to come work for us. This manager's toolbox is key, right? I mean, how do we retain top talent? Know who our top performers are. Make sure we're tracking turnover rates and retention data. Be aware of people's attitudes through surveys and things like that. Make sure we're identifying the risk factors. Know where the crunch points are, when there's no trust, when people don't feel engaged, when people don't believe in their company, they don't trust their company, they find it that they have disparate values. These are risk factors, and when you can identify risk factors, then you can start acting on them before it becomes a major problem. We always want to make sure that we are recruiting good workers, that we're engaging with them, that we are trying to keep people by making sure if somebody says, hey, I got a better offer elsewhere, I'm going to leave, you can come back with a counter offer. It's okay to be able to do that. Many companies do because they don't want to lose good workers. So if it costs you a little bit more money to retain a worker, it's worthwhile to do that, because the cost to hire somebody new will be greater than the cost it will be to give them a counter offer to pay them more money and have them stay. Lastly, talking about retirements, as I said, not all turnover, voluntary turnover, is within our control. There are going to be people that are going to retire, and so obviously we need to plan for that. So this is a voluntary turnover, a voluntary separation from the company. We do lose expertise. We do lose their institutional knowledge. But when we have older people who make more money retire, that creates a vacancy, that creates an opportunity for a lower paid worker to come in and do that work at an entry level, not because they're going to be paid less than that person if they had similar experience. What I mean is, in the hierarchy of things, the people at the top of the hierarchy are also our oldest workers. They're more likely to retire and to leave, so that creates the vacancy. And we want to bring in somebody new with new experience and with new ideas, and people who may need a job that they've never done this before. So they're going to hire these people to come in, and they will be paid less money. Because they're entry level. They're not coming in with 20 odd years of experience. They're coming in with maybe 2 years of experience. So that creates an opportunity for more jobs in the community. We also want an age-friendly workplace, because if we can hire people back as consultants, if we can have people work part-time instead of just fully retiring, we keep their institutional knowledge, and we create an environment where everybody, no matter their age, feels like they have something to contribute to the organization. We can also do something called bridge employment, where we start to reduce people's hours and their job demands as we get them prepared to retire. It gives an opportunity for other people to learn the skills that this individual does. They stay on as a way of retraining new people who are going to be doing and replacing them in the position. So that bridge employment is a nice transition for them to work their way out little by little, and also at the same time have somebody else in there who is learning that job and will then take over for them later.